So I have a theory that Mass Effect 5 has already connected all timelines by bringing back Tali's dropped storyline of dark energy. And once again, I think this theory is legit, because the executive producer of Mass Effect, Mike Gamble, gave us this incredibly important tease for Mass Effect 5. Everything we've seen from all N7 days will connect. Couple that with Gamble's mysterious tweet of the Milky Way and Andromeda smashing together, and we have a gigantic conundrum on our hands. How will the Milky Way and Andromeda connect? And most importantly, is it possible for both timelines to coexist? In this part 2 of 3 series that links all the N7 days together, I'll be theorizing answers to these questions and more. Like, for example, when we link the Geth poster from N7 Day 2021 to the relay from N7 Day 2022, we can answer exactly how the galaxies will connect, and how Liara is connected to the Geth. And if we connect N7 Day 2023 with N7 Day 2022, we can theorize about even more answers to Mass Effect 5, like why there's an Angara from the Helios cluster on what's likely the Citadel, why Cerberus' new leader is likely the one who created this relay, and why Ryder over here is likely the one who sent this Andromeda distress signal. What links all of these threads together, though, is Tali's dropped dark energy plot, which is at the heart of everything going on in these teases. So let's tackle how all of this connects, including some new teases I'd missed before, to definitively say why I have a lot of hope that every trilogy and Andromeda squadmate will be in the next Mass Effect. If they're alive in your playthrough, of course. To kick things off, we'll quickly go over a summary of part 1 of this series, because this video's theories will build on the red yarn I weaved in the last one. As always, with theories on this channel, I usually start with the teases first, then connect it to lore, and build the most likely theory about each tease's meaning from there. However, in this summary section, I'll just explain the connection between the teases and my conclusion. So to start, the first connection between N7 days was between N7 Day 2023's Epsilon, Oculon, and Nebula teases and N7 Day 2024's Command Helmet, Command Armor Note, and Spectre of Battles Past coat. By connecting these 5 command slashes, which represent lines of code, coupled with the helmet being called Command Helmet, I concluded that the new N7 is probably an AI. And with the Command Armor Note hinting at the coat being worn by one of Liara's old friends, along with the coat's name translating to Ghost of Battles Past, I also believe that the N7 AI is based on Shepard's data. Along with various other teases and Gamble tweets, the first major theory out of the N7 Day links is that the new N7 is a Shepard AI, which has a very specific purpose to fulfill. When Gamble was directly asked if the N7 is connected to this relay, he replied, "Maybe it's connected," which is basically confirmation that the two are very much linked. And based on the N7 stripe in the bottom left corner, and the 5 command slashes seen again here in the ongoing record of the relay's construction, I think the Shepard AI's main purpose is to monitor this relay's construction. Adding to that, the relay construction record here under for interior use only has the abbreviation SA, which very likely means that this relay is being constructed by the Systems Alliance. However, with the colors of this relay matching Cerberus's brand colors, along with the N7 walking in what's likely a Cerberus facility, I'm fairly certain that the Alliance and the N7 are actually under Cerberus's control, which we've already gotten hints of in one of the most recent Mass Effect books. In Mass Effect Initiation, it's already been mentioned that human-based groups like the Alliance, Home Away, and Homeward Soul are marching to the tune of an invisible conductor. And since 2 of these groups are heavily pro-human and anti-alien, I believe that Cerberus is controlling all these groups, including the Alliance. So whenever I refer to the Alliance here in reference to the teases, I'm basically referring to Cerberus. Also, we'll go over exactly who this invisible conductor is in this video, because their identity is the key to connecting all the timelines with the relay's construction. Back to the first video's theories though, after piecing together that the Alliance's leadership has been annihilated, I concluded that the date of this relay footage is November 7th, 2190, which very interestingly contradicts the Andromeda distress signal the Shepard AI received, sent in the year 2819. This particular timeline conundrum will be answered by the end of this video with the help of a new tease I've recently discovered. Back to the part 1 summary though, because of this footage's file name, we know that the Alliance's recording of the relay's construction was intercepted. This interception was also picked up by the N7, since it received a warning of a security breach. So this footage was clearly intercepted without Alliance permission. And we'll get to this pretty shortly, but based on Liara's hidden conversation about the relay, it appears that she's the one who intercepted the relay's footage. By putting all of these connected theories together, I came to one final chilling conclusion. The Shepard AI, whose primary purpose is likely to monitor the relay's construction, has been ordered by Cerberus to track down Liara, who intercepted the relay's footage. And based on it pulling out a silencer pistol in this clip, it likely has orders to eliminate Liara because she knows too much about the secret relay project. As a reminder, in the final video of this 3-part series, we'll go over why the N7 nods to the Krogan we see at the beginning of the clip. For now though, if you're ready to buckle up for some more red yarn theories, we'll dive into how even more N7 Day connections reveal how the trilogy and Andromeda's timelines will link up, and why Tali probably knows the most about that connection from her investigation into the geth and dark energy. To begin, here's every tease we'll eventually answer in the relay footage from N7 Day 2022. We'll go over what all of this means shortly, but arguably the most important tease is the audio hidden underneath the continuous droning, which, after doing some audio cleanup, is a conversation between Liara and a geth.
Exactly. The Council will be furious, although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. Perhaps worse, they must I see. How did we miss this?
As I mentioned earlier, Liara was likely the one who intercepted this relay footage without permission, and in the conversation she's having with an unknown geth, she says the phrase, "I can see it. How did we miss this?" Clearly, the "I can see it" refers to the relay itself, and she appears to be asking the geth, "How did we miss this?" Which likely means, how did they both miss the relay's construction in the first place? Obviously, with Liara as the shadow broker, she shouldn't miss intelligence like the Alliance constructing its own relay, but somehow she did. And I think she missed it because of where this relay is being constructed. In the file name, it says Cytherium system, which I believe is the system where this relay is being constructed. However, in the trilogy, we don't know of any known location called the Cytherium system, so very likely, the Alliance controlled by Cerberus is building this relay in the middle of an empty system with no mass relay traffic going through it, which is why Liara probably didn't have agents who would have known about its construction, and instead had to wait for this intercept to learn of its existence. We'll go over what the Doc 314 means later on, but for now, the rest of Liara's dialogue will help us confirm the date of this relay footage, which galaxy it's being constructed in, and also where humanity stands after the Reaper War. First off, the conversation started with the geth asking her a question we weren't privy to which Liara responded, "I can see it. How did we miss this?" Then the geth said something else, and she replied, "Exactly. The Council will be furious." Which tells us quite a bit right away. Liara mentioned how the Council would be furious at the creation of this relay, which tells us this is being constructed in the Milky Way, where the Council still has power. And ever since the Rachni Wars, the Council prevented races from using unknown primary mass relays, in case it led to Rachni Wars 2.0. So they definitely wouldn't approve of the Alliance creating their own relay, because they have no way of knowing where it could lead. What's very telling about the geth, though, is that it knew this too. Liara said exactly, meaning that the geth was the one who first mentioned the Council's disapproval, which tells us that this geth knows about Council politics, so it's not an unknown entity who's unfamiliar with the Milky Way. After this, Liara continued by saying, although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. It always was their most endearing trait, which is again a confirmation that the relay is being built by humanity's alliance/Cerberus. Them defiantly creating this relay against the Council's wishes also seems more of a Cerberus move than the Alliance's, which makes it more likely to me that Cerberus is controlling them. Liara remarking in a softer tone about human defiance being endearing is probably a reference to Shepard's own defiance, which she'd seen on multiple occasions. So out of this full conversation, we've learned quite a lot. Liara missing the relay's construction confirms it's being built in an unknown system. Both the Geth and Liara are likely in the Milky Way, where the Council still has power over relay use. And finally, humanity is uncaring of Council politics, which makes it more likely that Cerberus is secretly in charge of the Alliance. Now, the one extremely telling part of this whole chat was something that we actually couldn't hear, but technically we should have, which was the Geth's voice. In Mass Effect 3 during the Reaper War, Tali and Legion were both on Rannoch, each fighting for the fate of their people, and part of Legion's fight was uploading Reaper code to all Geth, allowing them to be more individualistic as Legion was, but also to be understood linguistically. If Legion is allowed to upload the code, a Geth Prime later states that they have all gained Legion's level of intelligence, which means that if the Geth Liara is speaking to also received that code, we should technically be able to understand it. However, clearly we don't. But Liara does, and in order to figure out which group of Geth this one is from and why Liara can understand it, we have to connect this to a different Geth tease from N7 Day 2021, which of course prominently included a Geth crater. Now once again, if my red yarn is correct, then this crater is linked to the Mass Effect comic titled Discovery. There's a panel in that comic that matches the Geth crater perfectly, even down to the tiny camera placement. So most likely, this is a hint that the Geth in that specific comic will be important for Mass Effect 5. And in Discovery, it goes over how there was a particular group of Geth that were different from the rest, which we'd never heard about before. From conversations with Legion, we had only learned about two groups of Geth, the Heretics and the Non-Heretics. The Heretics were ones who supported the Reapers and wanted the Quarians wiped out, and the Non-Heretics, like Legion, wanted to wipe out the Reapers and simply live in peace. But in Discovery, we learned of a third group of Geth, one that had crafted a unique faster-than-light or FTL telescope, letting it see faraway objects in real time. Among the Quarians' migrant fleet, this was called the Colas Array, and it was built by these Geth using strange technology. And very interestingly, the Quarian who knew about this Colas Array said that the Geth knew how to find a homeworld way beyond where anyone else was looking, and wherever these homeworlds were located, they were beyond the Milky Way, and also not in Andromeda, since they were uninterested in that galaxy too. So this third group of Geth was completely uninterested in supporting the Reapers or not. Based on what we've seen, they simply wanted to find a homeworld far away from everyone else in the Milky Way. And I believe that this incomprehensible Geth that Liara is talking to is one of those Geth who built the Colas Array. Since we don't understand it, it clearly didn't receive Legion's code, which means it wasn't in the Milky Way during the Reaper War. However, it also understands Council politics, so it is technically from the Milky Way, but likely wasn't present during the events on Rannoch. So where did this Colas Array geth go that wasn't the Milky Way or Andromeda, yet contained homeworlds? To me, this question is the key to everything else in the Mass Effect 5 teases, which is why I think the Colas Array geth have been so prominent in every major N7 day. And I believe once we unlock the answer to this question, we'll be able to explain everything else, including how the trilogy and Andromeda will connect. So to that end, I think the only other link to this mysterious geth is with Tali's dropped storyline, where a group of strange geth were studying dark energy.
Haystrom's sun is destabilizing. Back when this was a Quarian colony, it was a normal star. It shouldn't change that quickly.
Any idea what's destabilizing the sun?
If I had to guess, I'd say that it was dark energy affecting the interior of the star. The effect is similar to when stars blow off mass to enter a red giant phase. But Haystrom's sun is far too young for this to be natural.
And Haystrom's star Dolan was in a system that was controlled by geth. This dark energy plot, where the geth were mysteriously looking into its effects on stars, was dropped in Mass Effect 2. However, it appears to now be making a comeback in Mass Effect 5 in these concept art pieces. Illustrated by Marco Iazzi, we can see stars that are stealing energy from nearby ones for no discernible reason, and also stars that are destabilizing to the point of exploding. To me, this looks very much like what Tali was describing. Dark energy is likely affecting the interior of this star, causing it to destabilize just like Dolan. Except instead of just remaining in the red giant phase, this star appears to be exploding in what's likely a supernova. And very interestingly, in the other concept art piece, we can see a different destabilizing star over here, including what appears to be a starship flying towards it, and the title of the piece being Diving In. So what exactly is Mass Effect 5 implying here with this concept art? Honestly, to me, if I have my red yarn connected in the right places, I think it's showing us how the trilogy and Andromeda will connect. And in the year 2190, I think Tali also knows exactly what's going on here. So to piece all this together, let's go over everything these connections have confirmed so far. Liara is speaking to a geth we can't understand, who is likely a member of what I'm going to call the Colas geth. And it's been established that this Colas geth knew of a way to find homeworlds beyond where anyone else was looking, which makes sense with the original tease. This geth is incomprehensible to us because it likely went to a place with homeworlds that wasn't in the Milky Way or Andromeda. And to figure out where this Colas geth went, we dove into another rabbit hole with the Mass Effect 5 concept art. We're seeing what appears to be a ship traveling towards this destabilizing star, along with the phrase diving in. And also, we're seeing images of stars stealing energy, destabilizing, and exploding. This undoubtedly connects to Tali's dropped storyline about destabilizing stars due to dark energy. And it was a mysterious group of geth who studied the effects of dark energy on Dolan in Mass Effect 2, which would also make the geth the most likely group to understand why there's a starship flying towards a destabilizing star. So, by combining these tease-based theories together, I can only reach one conclusion. The Colas geth, who knew of homeworlds beyond where anyone else was looking for them in destabilized stars. And in order to find them, it likely requires diving in with a starship. Now, Tali never went over this, but she clearly knew the mechanics of what happens to a star if it continues to destabilize like this. Because while some supernovae stars turn into neutron stars, others turn into black holes. And as Einstein and Rosen believed, black holes might theoretically connect to form quantum tunnels, allowing for travel to places unknown. Or in other words, black holes could theoretically form wormholes, which would be the perfect explanation for what the geth discovered using the Colas Array telescope. Those geth likely pointed it at a wormhole, which allowed them to find homeworlds beyond where anyone else was looking. A similar concept was used in the movie Interstellar, and this illustration looks remarkably like that wormhole too. Back to the geth though. If they were the ones who studied Dolan's dark energy crisis, then they'd probably have the most knowledge of how to traverse it. So bringing it all back, how exactly will the Milky Way and Andromeda connect? By using the Colas Geth's wormhole access as the key to the rest of the Mass Effect 5 teases, we can unlock exactly how it's possible. The continuous droning sound we heard over the relay footage perfectly matches that of a black hole, which NASA released sounds of back in 2022. Since this matches the sound pretty well, I believe the droning is meant to represent a nearby black hole. And since that droning is so prominent in the clip, I think it's also tied to this relay's purpose. Many theories out there suggest that this relay is meant to tie the Milky Way and Andromeda together. And while I also believe that to be true, I think the way the two galaxies will be linked together is through quantumly entangled black holes because of the droning sound, which means the relay's purpose is likely to allow for the traversal of wormholes, just like how the Colas Geth have likely already done. And based on the orientation of this relay, the entire thing is likely meant to traverse them itself. The relays the Reaper made always had protrusions sticking in the up direction of the relay's proper orientation. So if that same logic applies, then this relay's proper orientation is supposed to be horizontal because the protrusions here are up, which would mean that this relay isn't just meant for staying in one place, but rather it could be for movement, making it a mobile relay. And if this is legit, then the entire relay might literally move into the nearby droning black hole in order to reach a different black hole in Andromeda. Back to the relay itself, this also implies that there are other mobile relays that the Alliance has created, potentially totaling up to 7. And the construction record and file name here also matches that theory. The first thing this says is vacuum dock relay construction record, which implies that there's a dock out in the vacuum of space that is holding this relay, and potentially relays 1 through 6 as well. And the most likely dock holding the relay is Dock 314. Now with the Systems Alliance, the number 314 corresponds to the Relay 314 incident, which was also called humanity's first contact war. In 2157, by traversing Relay 314, humans ran into the Taurians, which was their first instance with so-called aliens. In what's likely 2190 now though, since the dock name has this same notorious number, this likely means that wherever these mobile relays travel, it probably has a good chance of reaching first contact with unknown races, which would also make sense if this relay is for traversing wormholes. Potentially, the numbers 1 through 7 here are for other smaller starships landing within the mobile relay, and then the entire thing can move together as one entity into a wormhole, which this tease here also supports. The word here, DAO, is another word for ship, meaning that this company's name translates to Deep Space Ship SAV. I wouldn't be surprised if Deep Space DAO SAV is actually a front for one of Cerberus's many owned companies. But regardless if that's legit though, whoever owns the property of this relay clearly had deep space travel via ships in mind. Also another indication of this relay being mobile like a ship. To hammer this point home fully though, this last tease also fits the theory. There's a ship captain here named Zoa Ral Zillion Jones, likely assigned to the relay, who would probably be in charge of moving it through wormholes. And it's a very cool touch that the name of this person meshes both Quarian and human naming conventions together, probably to hint at something else on the horizon. Now, even though we figured out how the Milky Way and Andromeda will likely connect, we still have the issue of how the timelines will work. If this mobile relay traveled into a nearby black hole aiming for Andromeda, would it arrive in 2190 or 2819? Luckily, we don't have to guess, because these last three teases give us the likely answer. And by linking them all together, it also helps explain the date discrepancy I had mentioned earlier. Before that though, let's completely solidify the wormhole theory first by figuring out how exactly the geth met Liara, and also by figuring out Tali's likely role in the next Mass Effect. Right here on the geth poster, we can see a geth prime that's clearly not functioning anymore, and based on it being partially buried, it's been on whatever planet this is for a while. If we go over here, we can see another geth platform, and also what appears to be a deceased Quarian too. From the games, we know that the main planets that the Quarians and geth fought over was Rannoch, so I believe that's where these bodies are residing. And if it is, then we can make some guesses about who this group is and why they arrived here. Just looking at them closely, it's a very unique group of races. We have what's likely an Asari, Krogan, human, and Turian here. And I don't see any point for a group this diverse to be on Rannoch, unless some type of meeting was called. Since the geth crater is the most prominent feature in this tease, I can only assume they came to Rannoch to learn more about the geth. And as to who called this meeting, I believe it was likely Tali. The last known event we know of on Rannoch either has the Quarians returning to their homeworld, the geth retaining it, or both of them sharing the space. Which to me means that now in Mass Effect 5, either the geth are calling this meeting, or potentially Admiral Tali, or some mixture of both. Since the majority of players from the Mass Effect Legendary Edition chose peace between both sides, I'm going to assume it's both Tali and the geth who called this meeting. And as to what the meeting about the geth is about, it's likely about sharing knowledge of their access to wormholes with everyone. I wouldn't be surprised if Tali was the one who called this groundbreaking meeting by contacting the top authorities in each race she knows of, meaning that this group has a very high likelihood of being Rex, Garrus, the Vermeer survivor, and of course, Liara. I also have a sneaky suspicion that this SFX ship is actually a Shadow Broker one, but I'll save that particular theory for a future Patreon post. We know for sure right now though that Liara gained the geth as an ally after whatever this meeting was, because they then witnessed the relay footage together. And as to Tali's likely role in Mass Effect 5, she likely knows the most about wormhole travel, since she's probably called this meeting, meaning that she might actually be one of the leaders for traversing wormholes. But of course, that's just a theory. Going back to Liara and the geth though, the platform is clearly following Liara around now, instead of staying on Rannoch. In this massive illustration from N7 2023, we can see a geth wearing clothes here with what's likely Liara. Gamble had liked this tweet where a fan theorized that this was Liara and her geth bodyguard. But based on this theory, I'd adjust this slightly to actually be Liara and the geth. As to why it's wearing clothes, I have a strong feeling that the geth who took a wormhole to places unknown began to evolve differently from the geth in the Milky Way, which is why this one looks so different, and why it's also not able to be understood, by us anyway. I won't get into that theory here though, but instead in the final video of this 3-part series. For now, that's everything in this geth poster explained, based on the connections to other N7 days, and even the comics. Which means it's finally time to explain the last 3 relay teases, to answer how exactly all the timelines will connect. Starting with the one tease I hadn't been able to answer until now. Over here is a ship with a very specific engine pattern that's in the shape of a cross. And looking at it horizontally, these 3 ships over here clearly have a very narrow hull that's not too bulky. When I checked the art of the Mass Effect trilogy book, I couldn't find any specific race or faction that used these specific ship designs. So to me, this is definitely a major clue for something to do with Mass Effect 5, and after some extensive sleuthing, I think I know what connection we're supposed to make here. Zooming out for a second, we can see the best view of this specific ship right over here, which is something I've actually never noticed in this footage before. And seeing it in this orientation, it looks remarkably like a different starship from Mass Effect Andromeda, which is of course the Initiative's ARCs, with the only difference being the Odyssey Drive System's engines are actually more like an X than a cross. However, with the body of the Hyperion here matching very closely to this construction ship, it confirms a long-standing theory I've had about who funded the Initiative, which connects to who's funding this relay's construction. It's common knowledge that when the Initiative's founder, G.N. Garson, ran out of funds, a mysterious individual called the Benefactor stepped in to fund the rest of the mission. And I'm fairly positive now that those extra funds must have gone towards the construction of the ARC ships, like the Hyperion, meaning that it was likely the Benefactor who chose the ARC ship's designs, and the most likely person who's funding this mobile relay's construction now. And as to who exactly the Benefactor works for, I can only see them being tied to one specific organization. After making a separate deep dive video into everything about them, these are the confirmed traits of the Benefactor that I could find, with an extra focus on these 2 traits specifically, because the only people we know of who had knowledge about the Reapers in 2179 and had access to massive amounts of wealth are those within Cerberus. I won't go over everything I covered in that video, but with these ships also being linked to the construction of what's clearly a Cerberus-made relay, there's one too many coincidences happening here. Cerberus undoubtedly controls the Alliance now, and very likely influenced the Initiative very early on with similarly constructed ships. So based on all my theorizing for the past 3 years, I believe very strongly that the identity of the Benefactor is the current new leader of Cerberus, and also that they have a big likelihood of being the same invisible conductor that Garson mentioned in the book Initiation, which makes a ton of sense for what this relay's purpose is probably for. If this relay is meant to connect the Milky Way and Andromeda, the one who funded the Initiative likely wants a reliable way to travel between both galaxies. And connecting this to part 1 of this series, if the Benefactor is the leader of Cerberus, then they're probably the one who gave orders to the Shepard AI. They likely want to protect the relay's construction above all else to connect with the Helios cluster, which is why they're probably ordering something as drastic as Liara's assassination. And again, I'll go over exactly who I think the Benefactor could be based on all the teases in my next video. Now, even though this is all just theories, it's through connecting the teases from all the N7 days that have gotten us to this point. But the one discrepancy that I haven't been able to explain through the teases yet is the date discrepancy of 2190 and 2819. That is, until now, with the final 2 teases in the relay footage. This screen blip tease has consistently confused me for years now, but I think I finally cracked it, because I think the timing of the blip and the consequences after it happens is the key, with one of those consequences being the way Liara and the Geth talk to each other before and after the blip occurs.
Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. How did we miss that? Was there was Exactly. The Council will be furious. Although they should know by now not to underestimate human defiance. It was there was How did we miss this?
Before and after the blip, Liara and the Geth have a normal conversation without talking over each other. However, when the blip occurs, we can hear Liara talking over herself, along with the Geth repeating its previous noises from earlier. So basically, what I think this means is that this strange blip is likely causing time to rewind and overlap with what's currently happening. And the last tease from the relay footage is also affected by the blip. While this ship moves towards the relay, there's actually a second ship over here that mirrors its movement perfectly. As the original ship begins to change direction, the mirrored ship also changes direction in the same way. However, when the blip occurs, this causes the mirrored ship to repeat its previous action. So once again, the blip has been associated with a weird time warp mechanism of some kind. And if we think about what happened with this time date discrepancy, it likely also matches up with the blip. We know that the Shepherd AI was likely watching the relay's construction because of this N7 stripe connection in the bottom corner. And in the Epsilon tease, the Shepherd AI also heard Liara's audio transcript at the same time, likely in 2190, which would mean that the rest of this data the N7 received was actually when this strange time blip occurred, including the mysterious Andromeda distress signal from the year 2819. And if that connection is legit, then this single blip might have been associated with 3 different time warp events: Liara and the Colas Geth's voices overlapping, the strange mirrored ship repeating its movement, and the 2190 and 2819 years directly competing with each other. So to answer what this time blip is, I can only think of one explanation. Wormholes have been at the heart of all the connecting teases so far, and very likely, this time warp blip is no different. So the most likely explanation to me is that the nearby droning black hole is already capable of connecting to Andromeda, and for whatever reason, wormhole-like activity is already occurring, with this distress signal coming through the black hole from the year 2819 to the year 2190, which to me means that this date discrepancy literally confirms that both the Milky Way and Andromeda are already coexisting in 2 different time periods. And I think there's actual evidence of this time travel taking place in this tease that I didn't even think twice about until I watched Kayla Elizabeth's video on it. In this illustration from the N7 Day 2022 blog, we can see what's obviously the Citadel, and beside it we can see a moon, along with a ship traveling toward it over here. Now at the end of Mass Effect 3, we saw that the Citadel was connected to London with a space elevator beam, so very likely what we're seeing in this tease is the Citadel above Earth, with this being Earth's moon, Luna. And the crazy part here is that because of this ship's blue energy trails, this is undoubtedly the Tempest. Ryder's ship is the only known ship to leave blue trails like this, and the wider engine leading to a narrower nose is very distinctive and also matches what I'm seeing in this tease, which would mean that we're directly seeing a tease of the Tempest in the Milky Way. And this literally wouldn't be possible unless they took a wormhole that allowed for 2 timelines to coexist simultaneously. And crazily enough, that's once again what we're seeing here, with what's likely the Tempest crew speaking with Liara on the Citadel. Gamble's liked tweet from earlier confirms that this is probably Liara and the Colas Geth. And with all the humans milling about here, it's very likely showing us a Citadel populated by Earth's people. If we couple this with the Tempest we likely saw flying towards the Citadel, my earlier theories about this being Jal and Ryder are actually legit now. So to bring everything in this video together, the likely order of events in the teases is probably this. First, in 2190, Liara and the Colas Geth saw the new relay around the same time that the Shepherd AI received the Andromeda distress signal from 2819. This distress signal was most likely sent through the nearby black hole, which is already capable of acting as a wormhole with time travel capabilities. And I don't think we have full confirmation of this, but I think when the blip on the footage occurs, this might be when the Tempest arrived back in the Milky Way, causing a time warp disturbance. Most likely, they were the ones who sent the distress signal, so something is going on in the Helios cluster that has them spooked enough to return to the Milky Way. Then, after arriving, they went to the Citadel, where they met with Liara and the Colas Geth. So with this sequence, we're literally seeing how the 2 galaxies' timelines will connect. Liara is probably getting confirmation here that wormhole time travel is legit, and based on Jaal's posture, he's desperately trying to emphasize why the Tempest fled the Helios cluster in the first place. I'll leave what exactly Jaal is probably spooked over for the last part of this series. But for now, with all the N7-Day connections we've gone over in this video, I think it's safe to say wormholes that connect both galaxies' timelines is a lock for Mass Effect 5, meaning that potentially both the Tempest crew and the Normandy crew can coexist in the next Mass Effect. And if everyone returns, the main plot lines that left off with cliffhangers might finally be resolved, which is actually something that Mass Effect 5 is hinting at happening through the return of a crucial aspect of Mass Effect's core story structure. Watch this video next to discover how the trilogy's endings broke from its usual plot structure, and how Mass Effect 5 is already fixing that in the next game. See you there.
Logging you out, P7.